please silence all cell phones, and please note that there is absolutely no photography or recording allowed of any kind. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'm so delighted you're here with us on this special occasion. It's great to see so many people here and our friends next door in Camp Concert Hall. Hello to you as well, watching tonight's talk on a big screen. Now, many of you joined us earlier today when we officially dedicated the Carol Weinstein International Center. This evening's address by Thomas Friedman continues our celebration of the opening of that remarkable academic facility. Now, Carol Weinstein and her family are with us this evening, and I invite them to stand if they please would. It's Carol, her husband Marcus, daughter Allison, son-in-law Ivan, and granddaughter Maddie. Carol, your vision and your generosity tangibly represented by that wonderful new International Center and all the years of friendship you've shown to all of us at the university strengthens our ability to develop graduates who will assume global leadership roles. We're grateful for your generosity in making Mr. Friedman's visit possible as well. So on behalf of our students and faculty and staff and alumni and friends and members of our greater Richmond area, thank you and your family for all that you do for us. It is my pleasure now to introduce Tom Friedman, Foreign Affairs columnist for the New York Times. He's a 3-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize, and he has an enviable list of best-selling books that include Hot, Flat, and Crowded, The World is Flat, and The Lexus and the Olive Tree. Frequent guest on programs such as Meet the Press, and he has somehow found time to produce 3 compelling documentaries that have aired on the Discovery Channel. Mr. Friedman's remarkable career is featured in your program, including the fact that he was a study abroad student himself during his college years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Thomas Friedman.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a treat to be here at the University of Richmond. President Ayers, thank you very much. Thank you to the Weinstein family for honoring me by giving me a chance to honor you at this occasion. So it's a real treat. You know, being at the dedication of the beautiful International Center was just another reminder to me. One of the things that really keeps me going these days, source of my optimism, is our country actually is exploding today with innovation from the ground up. A lot of people doing exciting things. I mean, just this past few weeks, I've been to Akron, the University of Akron. They have a new biomedical center, and then I was in Pittsburgh, and I saw some great new healthcare things they were doing, and you sort of never know it, you know, reading the newspaper. But the wait a minute, I work for the newspaper. So, but our country's actually, it's really alive. I mean, you know, I speak a lot about energy and environment, and everywhere I go now, small schools, big schools, I will end a talk, I'll do a book signing, people will come up to me with their energy ideas, their entrepreneurial ideas, and it just tells me that the country's really alive. I go back to my hotel room after these talks, I empty my pockets of business cards from energy innovators. You know, rock stars get room keys, I get business cards, but they're very exciting to me in their own way, because they really tell me our country is alive. In fact, if I were to draw a picture of America today, it'd be a picture of the space shuttle taking off. You've seen that space shuttle, all this incredible thrust coming from below. And your new International Center is part of that thrust. Unfortunately, our booster rocket, Washington, D.C. these days, is cracked and leaking energy. And the pilots in the cockpit are fighting over the flight plan. And so our country right now feels like it can't quite achieve the escape velocity it needs to get into the next orbit, the next great industrial revolution, especially in this flat world. Well, I'm not here to give advice for Washington, D.C., and But I am here, hopefully, to share with you my thoughts about how we enrich that thrust coming from below. And the key to that, I believe, is knowing what world you're living in, and where are the opportunities, and where are the requirements in order to thrive in this world. Now, people have asked me, The World is Flat came out in 2005, and so it's 5-6 years now, and people have asked me, did you get it right? Did you get it right? I tell them always, no, I got it wrong. They say, really? We thought so. We thought so. What'd you get wrong? The world, it turns out, is so much flatter than I thought. That's the only thing I got wrong, okay? All of these trends, folks, are just getting more and more intense. What I really want to talk about this evening is, what does that mean? How does a school, how does a student, how does an entrepreneur think about thriving in a world that's just getting flatter and flatter? Now, the first thing you have to know about this book is that it came about completely by accident. I wish I could tell you I'd been studying at Caltech or something and sitting in the library, and the whole thing just kind of burst out of my head. I began as a columnist at the New York Times, as the president said, in 1995. And from 1995 till September 11, 2001, my column really focused on globalization issues. I was very interested in globalization because my last job before becoming a columnist was covering the Treasury Department, right when globalization was borning and email was just beginning. And but I dropped that whole globalization story on September 11, 2001. I spent the next 3 years really traveling the world trying to understand the roots of 9/11. And during that period, I began doing documentaries for the Discovery Channel as well, in a partnership with the New York Times. We did one documentary on the roots of 9/11. We did another on the wall Israel had built in the West Bank. And this whole thing started in February of 2004, when we were sitting around with our Discovery team trying to figure out what to do our next documentary on. And at that time, this is post 9/11, now post-Iraq invasion, post-Afghanistan invasion, the big issue was, why does everybody hate America? So I said, let's do that as a documentary. Why does everybody hate America? Well, how should we do that? Well, I had this crazy idea. This is how it all started. That what we should do is go to call centers all over the world and interview young people, foreigners, who spend their days imitating Americans on what they thought of America. And I thought it'd be a very interesting sort of double mirror. John by day, Juan by night. What do you actually think of America, And we were literally budgeting out that documentary when John Kerry, then running against George Bush, came out with his blast against what he called Benedict Arnold's CEOs. CEOs who engage in outsourcing. And suddenly this issue of outsourcing just exploded onto the world stage. And cover of Forbes and Fortune and Wall Street Journal, New York Times. So I said to our Discovery guys, I said, let's time out. Why don't we just go to Bangalore, India, the capital of outsourcing? And let's do a documentary called The Other Side of Outsourcing. And let's explain really what this is all about. They liked that idea. So on February 1st, 2004, I headed off to Bangalore, India with our little Discovery crew. And over the next 2 weeks, we shot about 60 hours of interviews on film. And across those 60 hours, I got progressively sicker and sicker. It was not the food. It was somewhere between the Indian entrepreneur who wanted to write my new software from Bangalore and the Indian entrepreneur who wanted to read my x-rays from Bangalore and the Indian entrepreneur who wanted to trace my lost luggage on Delta Airlines from Bangalore, that I realized that even though I had written a book on globalization in 1999, The Lexus and the Olive Tree, I realized that while I had been sleeping, while I had been off covering the 9/11 wars, something really big had happened in this globalization story, and I had completely missed it. I just kept going around people who wanted to read my x-rays from Bangalore and saying, I don't get it. What's the platform that's enabling this to happen? Well, the last interview we did was with Nandan Nilekani, the CEO of Infosys, which is kind of the Microsoft of India, India's premier technology company. Nandan was an old friend, but he had been gone the 2 weeks I was filming there, and he came back just the last day. Went out to his office at the beautiful Infosys campus, sat on the couch outside his office, there's a little plaque on the wall there now. The crew was setting up inside. I had my laptop on my lap. And Nandan, I was sort of bursting with impressions of my trip from India. And at one point, Nandan said to me, Tom, I've got to tell you, the global economic playing field is being leveled. The global economic playing field is being leveled, and you Americans are not ready. Oh, I wrote that down on my little laptop. The global economic playing field is being leveled, and you Americans are not ready. Well, we did the interview, and afterwards I got back in my Jeep, head back to my hotel, about an hour's drive. And now my head was like exploding. And it just kept rolling over in my mind what Nandan had said. The global economic playing field is being leveled. But what he's really saying is the global economic playing field is being flattened. And then in a crazy chemical burst, it just popped into my head that what Nandan Nilekani, India's premier engineer entrepreneur, was telling me was that the world is flat. And I wrote that down in my notebook. The world is flat. I got back to my hotel, the Leela Palace, ran up to my room, called my wife in Bethesda and said, honey, I am going to write a book called The World is Flat. She now says she thought that was a brilliant idea. That's not exactly how I recall the conversation. You're what? But I did come home and tell my bosses at the New York Times, ladies and gentlemen, I need to go on leave immediately. I need to go on leave immediately because my software is out of date. The framework through which I've been looking at the world is out of date. I'm a basic engineer, and it's a Java world. And if you don't give me a sabbatical immediately to write this book, I'm going to write something really stupid in the New York Times. It's a great way to get a leave, I have to tell you. And so I started this book I started it in June of 2004. I turned it in December 2004. Don't try this trick at home, kids. Kind of blew out my forearms, in a kind of burst of energy to get this out. Now, what is the basic argument of this book? Well, the meta-argument is that there have been three great era of globalization. The first I call globalization 1.0, lasted from 1492 until the early 1800s. And that era of globalization shrunk the world from size large to size medium. And that era of globalization was built around countries. That is, you went global through your country. So the country, the nation state, was the agent, the dynamic agent of globalization. Whether it was Spain exploring the New World or Britain, colonizing India or Portugal, East Asia, the nation state was how you went global. From 1800 till right around the year 2000, we had the second era of globalization, globalization 2.0. It shrunk the world from size medium to size small. And that era of globalization was really built around companies. Companies going global for labor and for markets. They were the dynamic agent of globalization. While you were sleeping, at least while I was sleeping, we entered the globalization 3.0 era, from the year 2000 to the present. And this era is shrinking the world from size small to size tiny and leveling the global economic playing field at the same time. Only what's really new, really exciting, really a little terrifying about this era of globalization is that the dynamic agent is no longer the country, and the dynamic agent is no longer the company. No, what's really new about this era of globalization is the dynamic agent is the individual. What is new about globalization 3.0 is the degree to which individuals can now globalize themselves or act globally to compete, connect, and collaborate as individuals. That is the new thing. How do we get here? Well, in the book, I talk about 10 flatteners, 10 forces that kind of created this platform. I'm just going to focus on the three key ones this evening. The first was the invention of the PC. What the PC allowed, what the personal computer allowed, was for the first time in the history of the world for individuals to author their own content in digital form. Now that sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook. but it's actually really important. You see, individuals have authored their own content ever since cavemen and cavewomen etched on cave walls. But with the personal computer, individuals with incredible ease could author their own content, words, photos, data, spreadsheets, video, in digital form, in the form of bits and bytes. And once your content was in digital form, in the form of bits and bytes, you could manipulate it so many more ways and send it so many more places. The second huge flattener is something that happened on 8/9/95, August 9th, 1995, which I consider to be, probably the most important date in modern history. Because on 8/9/95, a small startup company called Netscape went public. And basically, the world has never been the same since. What was Netscape's product? Netscape's product was a simple device called a browser. And what this browser did, invented by Mark Andreessen, was allow people to illustrate on a computer screen what was heretofore locked away in what were known as internet files that were really just the province of academics and computer scientists. Tim Berners-Lee would come along very quickly thereafter and invent the website, basically. But what the browser did was bring the internet to life by giving us a simple tool which allowed us to illustrate on a computer screen what was in an internet file. So grandma and grandpa, grandson and granddaughter could suddenly all use the internet with equal facility. But the Netscape IPO, Netscape's going public on 8/9/95, also did something else hugely important. You remember what happened? On the morning of 8/9/95, Morgan Stanley brought Netscape public. Stock was priced at $28. Jimmy Barksdale, the Netscape CEO, Morgan Stanley wanted to be priced at 32, but Jimmy said, no, if this fails, I want it to be remembered as a $20 stock. Netscape opened that morning at $71.50. It closed the first day at 56. And we all looked at that and we said, whoa, there is gold over them there hills. And what we did was we went out and bought every .com that moved. The Netscape IPO is what launched the internet boom. And the internet boom launched the internet bubble. And the internet bubble launched a massive overinvestment, utterly absurd and ridiculous, of close to $1 trillion, that's with a T, into fiber optic cable. And all of that fiber optic cable, which we all funded by buying all those .coms, you can't fool me, I know they're in your 401ks, okay? We accidentally wired the world in 5 years with fiber optic cable. And when we did, without anybody planning it, we made Bangalore, Boston, Richmond, Tokyo, and Beijing all next door neighbors. How did it happen? Well, just think about it. First, I could author my own content in digital form, and then suddenly, thanks to the internet, I could send my digital content anywhere in the world virtually for free. And then along came the third flattener. Somebody's phone going on? Excuse me. You die. Then along came the third flattener. Third flattener is something I call workflow software. Again, sounds like gobbledygook. Workflow software, all those transmission protocols, HTML, HTTP, XML, SOAP, AJAX, you don't need to know what they mean. All you need to know is this. What all those transmission protocols did collectively was make everyone's computer and software interoperable. Now, all the students here have no idea what I'm talking about, okay? But let me explain to you. When your mom and dad first got email, your mom was on CompuServe, and your dad got AOL, and they didn't connect. No, they didn't. Until somebody came along and invented software protocols that made everyone's computer and software interoperable, no matter where they were in the world, no matter what software they were running. Oh, it must have been an exciting day here at the University of Richmond. Because in the accounting department, they got rid of the abacus, and they got SAP software. And in admissions, they got rid of all those dirty files, and they got Microsoft. But they didn't connect. So whenever one of you didn't pay your tuition, someone from accounting had to go over to someone in admissions with a piece of paper. What the transmission protocols did, what the workflow software revolution did, it was a quiet revolution mounted entirely by geeks, was make everyone's computer and software interoperable. Now let's put the three together. First, I could author my own content in digital form. Then about 5 years later, I could send my content anywhere in the world virtually for free. And then, thanks to the software revolution in transmission protocols, I could collaborate with anyone in the world on their content anywhere they were virtually for free. That, friends, is what I say. When I say the world is flat, that's what I mean. What I mean is we created a platform where more people in more places could suddenly compete, connect, and collaborate farther, faster, deeper, cheaper than ever before. We basically went from a world where value was being created in vertical silos of command and control to a world where value would be created on this platform by who you connect and collaborate with. We are going from a world of vertical to a world of horizontal. It is the biggest inflection point since Gutenberg invented the printing press. And you just happen to be here. That's what I mean when I say the world is flat. Now, what I then go on to argue is that this new platform then launched a whole new group of, or a whole new ways to collaborate. So there was outsourcing, there's supply chaining, there's insourcing. I talk about all of them in the book. I'm going to talk about the one that's most relevant to all of you here, particularly the students, new form of collaboration. It's one, Kevin Kelly gave a name to this from Wired, which I really like. It's called uploading. See, when the world was round, you downloaded. But when the world is flat, you as an individual now can upload your own content. Uploading comes in many forms. Blogging is a form of uploading, okay? Open source software, a bunch of geeks getting together to write their own operating system, Linux, to upload their own operating system, not download Windows, okay? YouTubing is a form of uploading, okay? Twittering is a form of uploading. And of course, the mother of all uploads is Wikipedia, all right? The people have been writing their own encyclopedia. I mean, I grew up in Minnesota in the 50s. I remember when the Encyclopedia Britannica salesman would come to our house in Minneapolis, and all those books, and he'd put them down in the living room, and I'd crack one open. It was so exciting. Then we got Windows, and it came with its own encyclopedia in Encarta. And you downloaded Encarta, and you know how many entries Encarta had? It was a blowout number. It had 38,000 entries. Well, last time I checked Wikipedia, it had 3,234. Okay. The people are just uploading their own encyclopedia now. Now, it has its flaws and it has its issues, but nevertheless, uploading is a revolutionary form of collaboration, and it's really changing everything. So that's how the world got flat. That's the most revolutionary, say, aspect of new collaboration. What do you need to know about thriving and surviving in this world? Well, I've got two main rules of business for the flat world. Rule number one is very simple. When the world is flat, whatever can be done will be done. The only question is, will it be done by you or to you? Just don't think it won't be done, okay? So if you have a good idea here at the University of Richmond, promise me you will pursue it, because someone at the University of Shanghai or someone at the University of Boston or someone at the University of Brazil will have it 1 second later, because when this many people have this many distributed tools of innovation and this much connectivity, if you have a good idea, promise me you will pursue it. Because in this world, whatever can be done will be done. The only question is by you or to you. So I was in Peru 3 or 4 years ago with our family. We were on an eco tour. We were being hosted by the head of ecotourism there, Alfredo Ferreras, and my book had just come out in paperback, and Alfredo knew the kind of thing that I was interested in. One day comes to me and says, "Tom, I got a great story for you." "What's that, Alfredo?" He said, "I got a friend who's now selling Peruvian dishware he makes. He makes it in a village near Cusco, and he's now selling his Peruvian dishware on the internet from a village near Cusco." "That's great, Alfredo." But then he adds this: he's looking to see whether he can get his dishes made cheaper in China today. Okay. Whatever can be done will be done. If he doesn't do it, the villager next to him will. Okay? I was, 3 or 4 years ago, I was in Budapest. Free University there did a weekend seminar on the world is flat. All these European scholars screaming at me about how I was wrong and whatnot. It was fascinating. Anyways, they assigned me a driver while I was there for 3 days in Budapest. Lovely guy. And he took me around. I left early on a Sunday morning, very early, like 7 a.m. He was driving me to the airport. And on the way to the airport, he said, I'm in the back seat, bleary-eyed. He said, Mr. Tom, if you have any friends coming to Budapest, please tell them about me. You know, I do all kinds of driving, tourism, business, driving, diplomatic driving. So I said, well, give me your card. I said, give me your card. No, please, I'll take it home. He said, no, just go to my website. I said, you have a website? And he gave me his card, and the website was on there. And so when I got home, I looked it up. It was in beautiful website, full of pictures, all his different kind of vehicles, all his different kind of services. It was in Magyar, German, and English with music. So I looked at that and said, whoa. It reminded me, so I just had this flash of something, I covered Secretary of State James Baker for 4 years, and something Jimmy said after he stepped down as Secretary of State, retired. He said, how do you know in Washington, D.C. you're out of power? In Washington, D.C., you know you're out of power when your limousine is yellow and your driver speaks Farsi, okay? So it's sort of like, how do you know you're in a flat world when your Hungarian cab driver has his own website in Magyar, German, and English with music? Okay. So that's our first rule. In this flat world, whatever can be done will be done. Now, the second rule, and this really brings me to the heart, I think, of your mission here at the University of Richmond, is this. When the world is flat, the most important economic competition going forward is no longer going to be between countries. Well, that's important, but that's not going to be primary. And it's no longer going to be between companies. Well, that's important, but it's no longer going to be primary. No, when the world is flat, the most important economic competition is now between you as an individual, and your own imagination. Because what you as an individual now imagine in a flat world, you can now act on farther, faster, deeper, cheaper than ever before. And trust me, if you don't act on it, somebody else will. So the single most important competitive advantage in the world today is actually this. It's the ability to spark ideas. It's the ability to imagine. Because you see, if I've got this, I can actually now go to Delta in Taiwan and they will design it. And then I can skip over to Jack Ma and Alibaba in Hangzhou and he'll find me a Chinese manufacturer to make it. Then I fly back over to Seattle and Jeff Bezos at Amazon.com will actually do my fulfillment and delivery. Freelancer.com will design my logo and stationery, and someone on Craigslist will do my accounting. Friends, in this flat world, everything now is a commodity except this. And therefore, if you aren't educating your students to do this, they're going to be at a real disadvantage in this world, where imagination is the single most important competitive advantage. So, in my view, there are really just two kind of countries, two kind of companies, two kind of universities in the world. What I call HIEs and LIEs, high imagination enabling countries and low imagination enabling countries. It's no longer developed and developing. It's companies, countries, and institutions that really nurture individual imagination and those that don't. My friend Kurt Carlson, who runs SRI, the former Stanford Research Institute, I was just out visiting with him in Palo Alto the other day, and Kurt has a wonderful saying which I really like. He says, Tom, basically, everything top down is dumb and slow, and everything bottom up is smart and chaotic. Okay? And the center of gravity of innovation today is actually moving down, okay? Because so many individuals now are empowered to compete, connect, and collaborate. So the center of gravity is moving down, and the job of a company, a country, and a university is actually to inspire, educate, and enable that stuff that's coming up. So that's really, to me, the fundamentally new paradigm for work in this 21st century flat world. Well, then what does that mean for educators? Well, basically, Dan Pink wrote, I think, a great book about this called A Whole New Mind. And Dan basically argues that, look, it's a right brain world now. I mean, remember, you got your left brain, you got your right brain, left brain, very linear thinking, counting. You use your left brain a lot on your SAT, very repetitive, right brain, synthesizing, storytelling, empathetic. In Dan's words, basically everything on the left side of your brain can now be done by a computer faster or an Indian cheaper. Okay. So it's a right brain world, all right? And that means what education really is going to be about more and more, has to be about more and more. It's not just more education. Lord knows we need reading, writing, math, and all of those skills. But it's going to be about those right brain skills. So we need the more education, we also need the right education. So where does that come from? Well, I was not set up to say this. I've said it many times before. It comes from liberal arts, okay? Liberal arts is actually even more valuable, I believe, in a flat world than ever before. Because in a world which is all about synthesizing things and sparking imagination, how you nurture right brain skills is through, I believe, the liberal arts. One of my favorite quotes in this regard comes from a friend of mine, Mark Tucker, who ran the National Center on Education and Economy. And Mark put it this way: where does creativity come from, he said. Well, creativity comes when people who have mastered two or more quite different fields use the framework in one to think afresh about the other. Intuitively, you know this to be true. Leonardo da Vinci was a great artist, scientist, inventor, and each of those specialties nourished the other. He was a great lateral thinker. But if you spend your whole life in one silo, you will never have either the knowledge or the mental agility to do the synthesis, to connect the dots, to spark the ideas, which is where the next great breakthroughs come from. I mean, I can tell you personally, one of the things I've benefited from, I got my BA in Arabic and Middle East history. I'm a long way from that now. And then I learned about American foreign policy, and then I learned about economics and technology and globalization, and I spent the last 5 years really just thinking about kind of zoology, nature, environment, and energy. And I find what is most fun for me as a columnist is actually arbitraging all of them together. And if there's anything that gives me energy in what I do, it's taking all these multiple perspectives in a flat world, which I can now leverage, and mashing them up. Because when there are more dots that are available to you, whoever can do the most mashups is going to have, I think, the most interesting products, the most interesting books, the most interesting arguments. Now, the best argument in this regard, or for this kind of world, actually came from Steve Jobs in his 2005, if you've never read it, graduation speech, commencement address, at Stanford. And let me just read you the key line. Steve wrote, "I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford, and all of my working class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition. After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was spending all of the money my parents had saved their entire life. So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. It was pretty scary at the time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked interesting. It wasn't all romantic. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food with. And I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it, and much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless. Let me give one example. Reed College at the time, that's where he was a student, offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country. Throughout the campus, every poster, every label, and every drawer was beautifully hand calligraphied. Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes, I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this. I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture, and I found it fascinating. None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. And we designed it all into the Mac. It was the first computer with beautiful typography. If I had never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely, couldn't you resist? And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have had them. If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on this calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have had the wonderful typography they do today. It's a wonderful story, but it's about getting exposure to multiple disciplines: music, art, calligraphy, science, history, and being enriched by that, and you just never know when it's going to come out. So, once you've got all that in your head, then what? Then you have to learn to think more horizontally. As I said, this is really a horizontal world. We need experts on dots. Lord knows we do. Science and physics, and without them, we can't do anything. We need our experts on dots, and we need people who can mash the dots together. You have to be able to think horizontally. I actually got my first, because this flat world platform is where the action all is, so I actually got my first introduction to this when I was working on the book. This was way back now in 2004. Okay. But I think how the world has changed. So my daughter was going to school at the time, and she was in college in New Haven, Connecticut. We live in Bethesda, Maryland. And to get to New Haven, Connecticut from Bethesda, you actually have to drive almost an hour to BWI Airport in Baltimore, then fly to Hartford on Southwest Airlines, and then drive an hour from Hartford to New Haven. You could almost really go to London in the same amount of time. Never mind, I'm a hip guy, so I got an e-ticket. I actually got my secretary to get an e-ticket on Southwest Airlines, and first time I went up. And I wanted to make sure, because, I don't know if you're a Southwest crowd here, but as you know, Southwest is El Cheapo airline. They're just tickets that are labeled A, B, and C. A's board first, B's board second, C's board last. The only thing you need to know on Southwest Airlines is you do not want to be a C, okay? Because especially if you're carrying an extra bag of spring clothing for your daughter and you want room above the seat in the cabin. No problem, I said. Hip guy. Got my secretary to get e-ticket. And I got to BWI Airport about 90 minutes before the flight because I was going to make sure I was an A. Took out my Visa card, stuck it in the Southwest airline machine, and outcoded my ticket, and it said B. And I said, son of a, this thing is fixed. This is rigged. This is worse than Las Vegas. I'm here 90 minutes before this flight. There is no way I'm a bee. Ooh, I was mad. I went and got my Cinnabon and sat in the back of the bee line, stewing, you know. Well, I sat there, and 45 minutes went by, and then they called it. They called the flight, and then I saw it. All the A's seemed to be getting on, carrying what looked to me like just crumpled white home printer paper, as though they had gone online at 12:01 a.m. the night before and downloaded and printed out their own barcodes and boarding passes and taken up all the A seats. I looked at that, friends. I said, Friedman, you are so 20th century. You are so globalization 2.0, really. What I didn't know, what they knew, was that Southwest Airlines knew the world was flat. And they could get rid of their ticket agents and empower all their customers to become their own ticket agent. And effectively become employees of Southwest Airlines. And if you didn't mind spending the time and money to stay up at 12:01 a.m. the night before, actually paying Southwest Airlines to be their employee. Have a nice day, okay? So the next time I got smart. I stayed up till 12:01 a.m. the night before. You don't have to do that anymore, thank goodness. I downloaded and printed out my own barcode and boarding pass. And I got to BWI about 35 minutes to the gate before my flight. And when I did, I captured 60 minutes of productivity by interfacing with Southwest Airlines horizontally, not vertically. That move from vertical to horizontal today is happening in every school, every company, every country. And the people who do it the fastest, the smartest, the most intelligently and effectively are those who are going to get the most out of this flat world platform. So what does it mean for jobs and careers? That's really the question I find most often from young people and parents today. And I have a daughter 25 and one 22, so we talk about this a lot. What does it mean for careers in this flat world, and how does a university go about, besides offering liberal arts, preparing people for such a world? Well, my headline point on this is very simple. What everyone wants to be in a flat world is an untouchable. That's right, in the flat world, the caste system gets turned upside down. The untouchables become the highest caste. Who is an untouchable? In my world, untouchables are people whose jobs cannot be outsourced, automated, or digitized. And what everyone wants today to be is an untouchable. Well, there are two categories of people who are for sure untouchables. Or actually, you could say three. There are people who are special and people who are specialized. They're untouchables. Michael Jordan, J.K. Rowling, very special, don't have to worry, okay? Your brain surgeon, your eye surgeon, very specialized, don't have to worry. So if you're special or specialized, you're going to be fine. Also, if you're localized and anchored, you're going to be okay, but you'll be paid wages equivalent to the economy you're in. So your butcher, your baker, your candlestick maker, your divorce lawyer, they're not going anywhere. You're not going to do that with someone on the phone in India. They'll be okay if you're localized or anchored. But in between those special and specialized over here on the high end, localized and anchored, depending on really how good you are going to be a whole new set of careers, a set of careers which I like to call the new middle, because we need a new middle today. Our country is built on the middle class, and lately it started to look like a barbell, and that's not what we want. Fat on the high end, fat on the low end, and thin in the middle. So the question is really, how do we maintain a middle class in a flat world? What will be the jobs of what I like to call the new middle? Now, these are not specific jobs, but I think these are the job categories that people need to think about. First category are people who are great collaborators and orchestrators. We live in a world now where your first job out of college may well be deputy supply chain manager for India supply chain for Walmart, or for Kmart or for Costco. That so many jobs today involve collaborating and orchestrating peoples of different cultures, backgrounds, languages, and skills across a 24/7 global platform. You may be part of it, you may be orchestrating it or collaborating it, which is why your new International Center is so important. That's actually an important source of job skills. And I first started thinking about this on a visit to Infosys years later. I was visiting the campus, getting a tour, and the Infosys people said to me, I was in June and I was with my daughter, and they said, would you mind speaking to our summer interns? And I said, sure, I'd love to speak to your Indian interns. No, our American summer interns. I said, you have American summer interns at Infosys? She said, yeah, this was about 4 years ago now. We had 9,000 applications last summer for 40 spaces. Okay. And what these were mostly business school kids who understood that their first job may well be deputy manager of supply chain, for a Costco or Walmart or for a university even. And if they could show that they had experience collaborating and orchestrating from that end, it would be a great advantage for them. So great collaborators and orchestrators. Second category I call great synthesizers. As I said in my talk, this is really a world of mashups. It's really about being able to, there are so many more people out there, so many more ideas, so many more resources that are available to you. So people who can mash them together into new careers to take advantage of this world, there's going to be a huge number of opportunities there. One of the examples I always like to give is, one day, mom, dad out there, your son or daughter may come back from a year at the University of Richmond and say, Mom, Dad, I've chosen a career. What is it, honey? I want to be a search engine optimizer when I grow up. I sent you to the University of Richmond. You couldn't be a doctor, a lawyer, an ophthalmologist. You're going to be a search engine optimizer? What is that? Well, that's a whole new career spun off by the flat world. As you all know, if you are in the tennis shoe business, and I put tennis shoes into Google, whichever tennis shoe comes up first, if Nike comes up before Adidas is number one on Google, the advantage to Nike is exponential, especially if Adidas is on page 2. So that has spawned a whole new industry called search engine optimizing. How I get Nike or Adidas from page 2 on Google to page 1, or from the bottom of page 1 to the top of page 1. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Google now holds an annual ball for its search engine optimizer companies who are all there trying to what? Figure out the Google algorithm. So the good news is this is a multi-billion-dollar new industry full of careers. The bad news is it's a mashup between Madison Avenue and mathematicians. So if you go to a search engine optimizing firm, you find people who are experts in advertising and people who are experts in algorithms. And they're synthesizing the two together to design strategies to advance people up in page ranking. Great synthesizers. This is a whole new field. Fortunately for me, there's going to be a whole group of careers in explaining. Great explainers. Okay. There's going to be a lot of demand for that in this world of incredible complexity. And again, all these things I actually have to tell you, I learned about just by experience. So I learned about great explainers. I was out skiing out west one day, and our ski instructor at Snowmass was a guy named Howard Friedman. And he was a ski instructor by day, and he ran the photo shop in Aspen at night. And he just started telling me that his business model was all screwed up, and he finally found a way to unscrew it. Basically, what was happening is people were coming in with digital cameras every day, and he was spending 75% of his time explaining to people how their digital camera worked. And he finally, and basically not developing any pictures. And so he finally reconfigured his store. He created a classroom in front of the store with computers, and he went into the explaining business. he has a nice quote. He said, "We used to sell film and develop and print the pictures and give away the advice for free. Now we're selling the advice, and while we don't give away the products, they've become a smaller part of our business. We are going to make explaining the business." This is true in a whole set of fields. I mean, if someone went into the business of explaining to me how to use the clicker on my TV, I mean, just like once a month, I mean, just, we could like do it on a subscription basis. I mean, me alone, I could keep you busy, okay. So the fourth category I call great leveragers, so people who can leverage technology. Now why is this so important? Because, see, the only way we can maintain our standard of living today is if we train people here at the University of Richmond as absolutely the best we can. And then we give them access to the best technology in telecommunications so they can leverage that technology to be so productive that they, sitting in Richmond, can produce as much as 40 low-wage workers in China or India. See, the only way, we don't want to take those low-wage jobs back. No, what we want is to upskill our people and give them the technology so one of us can do the job of 40 low-wage workers. That's how we'll justify being able to pay people decent middle-class salaries. So it's about being able to leverage knowledge and technology to become hyper-productive. So I started thinking about this lately because my wife's best friend is the managing partner of a law firm in Washington, D.C., a pretty big national law firm. It's called Nixon Peabody. And we were together, at the end of this, sort of mid-summer, and I was asking him, what's the law business like these days? He said, it's terrible. We're downsizing like everybody else. So I said, that's interesting. Who gets fired first? Who gets fired first? And he said, it's not what you'd expect. The people we're letting go first are the people who, when we were overwhelmed with work, we gave it to them, and they gave it to us back. Finished. Those people are gone because we're not overwhelmed with work anymore. The people who are staying are the people who came to us and said, you know what, I've got an idea of how we can use our technology and our platform to actually invent new opportunity and industries for our law firm. I've got a way to do old work in a new way. Those are the people who are being kept. They're people who are learning to leverage technology, knowing what world we're in, and saying, I'm just not going to sit here and wait for the work to be handed to me, because it may be a long time before we have the kind of bubble we just went through where work is going to be handed to you. It's people going out and using what they know to invent whole new industries. The next group is, this applies to all of us, great adapters. You got to be a great adapter in this world. And in The World is Flat, I profile one of my favorite. Her name's Marsha Lockery. She worked at EDS. She had 8 different jobs there. She adapted to each one, and each job she left got outsourced, automated, or digitized. She just stayed one step ahead of the Pac-Man, okay? And she did it by following the advice that the president's economic advisor, Gene Sperling, said. He said, people need to think of themselves like Swiss Army knives now. All different kinds of blades, and you never know what you're going to be asked to do. But Gene said this to me once. I always like this quote. He said, people have to prepare for the workplace now like someone who's training for the Olympics but doesn't know what sport they're going to enter. They have to be ready to do anything. Next category, I'm not going to talk in detail about this one, it's just so obvious, is anything has to do with green. There's going to be a huge number of jobs around green innovation, green consulting, lead building design. It goes without saying there's going to be millions of those. Now the last category, and really my favorite, actually I got 3 others, I'm sorry, I'll do this real quickly. Well, one is math lovers. Not going to talk about that much, that's obvious. Basically, when everything gets digitized, what it means is that algorithms now are the source of so much information and advertising, and so anyone who has got a math background is going to get swooped up into this world. And even people who don't have math backgrounds are going to need it. My mom was in the hospital, unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, and in those dying days, and I spent a lot of time in the hospital, I was amazed at how many computers the nursing staff were using. And I was thinking, they don't have to be computer scientists, but you better be fairly literate in math in order to manage these new technologies. The seventh category I call great localizers. Those are people who understand how to localize the global. It's the sports bar owner here in Richmond who understands that he can actually use satellite TV now to show Japanese soccer league games and appeal to the Japanese community here, at 4 in the morning if they want to come into the bar. It's the Richmond tire dealer who understands that he doesn't have to rely on Goodrich and Firestone anymore. He actually can get his tires more cheaply from Romania. It's people who learn how to localize technology and global technology to their very local business or career. But the last one, and this one is important to me because in some ways it applies to all of us, and that is the career category I call passionate personalizers. I first started thinking about this because we used to share season tickets to the Baltimore Orioles baseball games, and there was a guy who sold lemonade at Camden Yards who fascinated me. Because now there is nothing more commodity than lemonade at Camden Yards. It is a plastic cup with water, sugar, and a lemon floating in it. It doesn't get any more commodity than that. But this guy didn't just sell you the lemonade. He shook it, he sat in your lap, he sang a song, he stood on his head. He turned it into entertainment. He took a commodity job and he passionately personalized it. And what I would notice at the end of every game is that he had a wad of bills 10 times thicker than any other vendor in the stadium. Because a lot of people come to me and say, Friedman, I've heard your list, but, I'm not a computer scientist. I'm not a math genius. What do I do? Well, there is no job in the world that you cannot bring what I call some chocolate sauce, whipped cream, and cherry on top to. Whatever you do. And whenever I meet it in the marketplace, I always try to respond to it. I was out in Minneapolis, my hometown, at the end of August, and I was at Perkins Pancake House with my best friend. 7 in the morning, I ordered 3 buttermilk pancakes and scrambled eggs, and he ordered 3 buttermilk pancakes and fruit. And the waitress came, and she put our plates down. She put mine down, she put his down, and she said to him just one thing: I gave you extra fruit. I love that, okay? She didn't control much, but she controlled the fruit ladle, okay? She didn't have much in her life that she could passionately personalize, but she controlled the fruit label. She got a 50% tip from me, okay? So whatever you do, you're the maintenance person, whether you're a waiter, waitstaff, try to bring some passionate personalizations to it. It'll help make you an untouchable. So that's the flat world. Those are the careers. Let me just end with a couple of points. Probably the 2 most terrifying quotes that I got in doing the research for this book. One was from Craig Barrett, then the head of Intel. And when I was working on the book, Craig said to me one day, Tom, I have to tell you, Intel today can thrive as a company and never hire another American. And in a flat world, that is the case. Our premier technology company today can thrive and never hire another American. Now, the last business person to actually come to Washington, D.C. and say that was Carly Fiorina, now running for senator in California. She came to Washington one day and was interviewed, and she said, a job is not an American right. She's now being savaged in her campaign for having said that. It's being thrown back in her face. It's a demonstration of the dysfunction of our political discussion today, that a blinding statement of the obvious now could get you defeated in an election. Because unfortunately, ever since she said that, every other business leader saw that and said, that's it. I ain't coming to Washington, and I'm not telling the truth. Second quote that really blew me away was from Bill Gates, and when I got to interview him for the book, he said, Tom, if you had a choice of being born 35 years ago, if you had a choice of being born a genius in Beijing or Bangalore, or a B student in Richmond, he said Peoria, I'll say Richmond. If you had a choice 35 years ago, you wanted to be born a B student in Richmond. Because your life chances as a B student in Richmond were so much better than a genius born in the middle of a crazy cultural revolution in China or a stultified Nehruvian socialist economy in India. When the world is flat, when every genius in Beijing and Bangalore can now compete, connect, and collaborate as easy as ever, you do not want to be a B student in Richmond. That was the other scary thought. I went home and as I wrote in the book, told my girls, when I was growing up, my parents said to me, Tom, finish your dinner. Don't you understand people in China and India are starving? And I go home and tell my girls, finish your homework because people in India and China are starving for your jobs, okay? So are we cooked? No, we're not cooked. We're not cooked. I go back to where I started. There's the thing I love about this country the most. There's a lot of things I love about my country. But what I love about my country the most is there's always somebody who doesn't get the word here. That's what makes America so great. There's always people, the Weinstein, they didn't get the word that you're not supposed to endow an international center at the University of Richmond now. Don't you understand the economy's flat on its back? What in the world are you people doing? Didn't you get the word? Okay? Well, bless your heart. That is what we have going. And we are in this world of that. And I do think having a country that at least used to welcome and embrace immigrants is a huge advantage, and having a free society. So, a lot of people say Britain owned the 19th century, and America owned the 20th century, and China's going to own the 21st century. To which I say maybe. I'm sure it wouldn't write China off. But they're not going to win it by default. We're not going to win it by default either. We got to get our act together. We got to fix that booster rocket and straighten out the pilots in the cockpit to begin with. But I'm just going to leave you with some wisdom my grandmother in Minnesota used to say. Grandma Friedman, God bless her. She used to sit in her rocking chair in the cold Minnesota winter, and she would say to me, Tommy, remember this: never cede a century to a country that censors Google. Thank you very much.
Goodness.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, folks, Mr. Friedman has kindly agreed to answer some questions. And I'm sure he generated a lot. And I get to be the moderator for this. And as the lights come up and I'll be able to see you, I'd be delighted to call on you. So who would like to ask the first question? Yes, sir, in the front.
Hi, I'm John McCullough.
Are you a student? Are you a student here?
I'm a student.
What are
And
you
we're
studying
going to
for?
be technologically amplified with this. And so when I call on you, wait for the microphone, which will quickly come your way.
What are you studying?
I have
if I
it
can
now.
ask?
I'm in Dr. Forsyth, a couple rows behind me.
Mhm.
He decided to get us these fantastic
Yeah,
seats.
great.
I wasn't paid. Anyway, we're taking a leadership course called Leadership in the Social Sciences. And first of all, I want to thank you for suggesting I drop out of college. I don't think that the University of Richmond would be very pleased if I dropped out and started going to their classes.
His advice was drop out of Reed College.
Yes, that's good.
I see. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Score one for the president. He was born at night, not last night, I'll tell you.
Anyhow, getting to the actual question. Philip Roth's definition of leadership is very similar in the sense that the the industrial conception of leadership is control from the top down.
Right.
Whereas the post-industrial sense, in his opinion, is collaborators and leaders. What is the flat world leader? Do we import it? Do we, is it a computer? What concept do you have? And I know you've written something more recently about that, and perhaps if you have a person in mind, you don't have to.
Sure.
But we're all looking for something that can
No, I
fix
hear
the
you.
booster rocket.
That's good question. So, I'm going to go back to what Kurt Carlson said. everything top down is stupid and slow. Everything bottom up is smart but chaotic. What does he really mean? He really means all of us are smarter than one of us. So if you actually have a platform that can actually empower, enable us to tap all of us, or more of us, you're gonna solve the problem quicker. And therefore, you're right. I've never heard Philip Roth's explanation. The way I would describe it, is a little bit different, is that leadership today, I think, is about inspiring, enabling, and empowering what's already coming up from below, rather than commanding, controlling, and demanding it, okay? So it's a very, very different model. And you're a little bit of a cheerleader, but not just a cheerleader. Because, so I wrote my column yesterday about this program the President Obama had wanted to initiate to create 8 energy hubs around America to actually solve the 8 biggest energy problems in the world. Batteries, fuels from sunlight, nuclear. They identified 8, building efficiency. And the idea was to give all 8 $25 million for 5 years, so you could really attract students and graduate students and whatnot. And the idea was they put this out for bid, and universities teamed up with national labs and private companies to bid for them. And the Congress has funded 3 of them. 3 of them, not for $25 million for 5 years, but for $12 million for 1 year. Okay. And I was writing a column critical of that, because that's a perfect example of, we've got it here. But government's job is to say, we've got it here. Let's empower, enable, and inspire it. Okay. And the failure of leadership is not to see that, not to inspire it, not to empower it, not to enable it. Okay. So I think that's really what leadership is about more and more. That's one way I'd answer your question. The second way I'd answer your question is I think we're entering a whole new phase. And it applies to university presidents, it applies to the president of the country, it applies to governors and your mayor. I would say for the last 50 years, to be a leader in America, political leader, was on balance about giving things away to people. More times, more days, it was about giving things away to people. I think we're entering a phase of at least 10 years, maybe longer, where to be a political leader in America today will be on balance about taking things away from people. Okay? Whether you're a university president, your president's lucky. Seriously, he comes from a university that's managed its money well, okay? And so he might not have to do that as much as the president next door, but trust me, when he gets together with his colleagues, that's what they will talk about. And that's what Governor Christie's doing in New Jersey, for instance. Big controversy because he said, we're going to cut the building of the tunnel between New Jersey and Manhattan, even though we need that. So dumb leadership and smart leadership in that world is going to be the following. And you're seeing a lot of display of this right now. The reason I've been critical of the Tea Party, okay, in my column, not because I don't think these people are authentic. I think they're really authentic. I think they're touching something very deep. And I love when I see people mobilized, to pursue what they believe in. But I call them the tea kettle party because it seems to me they're just letting off steam. And steam without an engine doesn't take you anywhere. So what do I mean by that? It is not enough to say we have to cut the deficit. No. You have to tell me which policeman you want fired, which school you want closed, which research project you want ended, which war you don't want to fight, which battalion you want removed, which old person you want to take Medicare with. Don't tell me you're mad. I'm mad too. Guess what? We're all mad, okay? But steam doesn't take you anywhere unless you have an engine. And the engine is saying, wait a minute, we're in a world, we have to cut back, but the world is flat. So what we actually have to do is raise taxes here, maybe on gasoline, and cut taxes here on payrolls and corporations. Maybe we need to actually cut services here on Social Security and actually add services here on education. That's what smart leadership is going to be about. So when I ever hear someone who says, I'm here to cut the deficit, I can't run out of the hall fast enough. Because I know how complicated this world is, and just cutting, that's not going to do it. You got to say, no, we've got this energy hub idea. We're actually going to fully fund all those, and instead of spending money to pave a road in Virginia? We're not going to do that. So I think you have to be much more subtle, much smarter, and you can no longer be a kind of purist Republican or a purist Democrat. You got to take everything as it is and really think strategically about it. Yeah.
Next question. Yes, sir.
Okay, we're back.
Jason.
Yes, sir. Hopefully the battalion you cut's not mine. I just want to start off by saying that. But the one thing that we talk about in the flat world that is so important is what created the flat world is a transfer of ideas and information. And with that, we've created this concept that we can shrink time and that we can do things much faster, much quicker. But a lot of these changes we're talking about, and it's a great example you brought up in your column yesterday, it takes time. So how do we get those people from below that we're trying to empower and get moving in the right direction? How do we create the time and space so that they can succeed in what they need to do? Because the dilemma of the energy policy, that's
Sure.
way beyond 5 years.
Right.
So
That's a very good question. And that really, all these are the same question. It gets back to leadership. There's such a premium now for a leader to be a great explainer. Because you have to explain to people what world we're in, what predicament we have. And that's where it all starts. If they don't understand what our priorities are, where you're going, what our problem is, and how your strategy as a leader connects from our problems to where we need to go in the world we're in, then they'll have no patience. And they'll be particularly susceptible to the candidate who comes along and offers some easy nostrum of how to get out of this problem. And one thing that I think we haven't done very well, I don't think President Bush didn't do it well, and President Obama hasn't really done it well, is kind of have an honest conversation about where we are right now as a country. There's always, it was all Wall Street's fault. Well, Lord knows, Wall Street, you can do whatever you want with them. People behaved incredibly badly there. But I know a few people who were making $15,000 a year trying to buy $800,000 homes for nothing down and nothing to pay for 2 years, and I don't think that was real smart either, And so, we actually haven't had an honest conversation about how we get out of this mess. And there's only one way to get out of this mess, okay? And we cannot bail our way out of it. We cannot stimulate our way out of it. There's only one way out, and it's the way we build this country. We have to make more products and more services that make people's lives more productive, more healthy, more comfortable, more entertained, or more secure, and sell them to more people around the world than anybody else. That's the only way, and therefore we have to train a workforce and to create an economy that will nurture that objective. If you are not selling stuff, designing stuff, to make people's lives more productive, more secure, more healthy, more entertained, and more comfortable, and selling it to more people, you don't have an economy. We're just flipping each other houses and hamburgers, okay? And so, did one of our leaders have that conversation with us? If they did, I missed it. It's all about who's going to stimulate who, and who's going to bail out who, and whether the stimulus was enough or not enough. And it's too little about, we got to roll up our sleeves. I've got a plan. Here's how my plan connects to you. It's going to take time. We've been on a huge binge, a huge credit binge. We're not going to dig out of this quickly. And if you want to throw me out, but throw me out at least on the basis of my plan, not on the basis of someone calling me a socialist, okay, or saying, he says he's a Christian, that's nonsense, okay, so that's really what I would say. It comes back to leadership. The only way you buy time is by explaining to people, okay, I get it now. This is what I got to do. But if nobody explains it, if the message is, if you make $250,000 or less, you're great, you're pure, you didn't do anything wrong. If you make $250,000 or more, it's something a little sinister about you. You're going to have to pay a little bit. Everybody should have some skin in this game. You make more than 250, boy, you should raise, their taxes. But everybody should have some skin in the game.
Since we've demonstrated that leadership is about taking things away from people, and that we've demonstrated that there is not really going to be enough time to do things, I'd like to combine both of those by saying that I'm afraid we've used the time that we have for today. Fortunately, you gave very rich answers to the two questions that we had time for. And I would like to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.